Welcome back to the SBY podcast, everyone. Newfoundland's number one podcast. I'm your host, Robert Greeley, and today we have Lloyd Parrott on deck, who was elected to the Newfoundland and Labrador House of Assembly in 2019 provincial election. He represents the electoral district of Terra Nova, which currently resides in my hometown of Clarenville, obviously, is within that district, as a member of Newfoundland and Labrador's Progressive Conservative Party. So we get into his whole life, his political career, and everything that he was doing beforehand with the military as well. It's a really good conversation. It's a long one, about an hour and 40 minutes. So yeah, I just want to get right into it so you guys can enjoy. But before we get started, quick question. Do you guys think we should just have the cold open, like, talking intros, or do you think I should throw in a little jingle or something like that? Let me know in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube, or, send us a DM or an email. But without further ado, this is the SBY podcast, Newfoundland's number one podcast. I'm your host, Robert Greeley. Enjoy. Lloyd, welcome to the SBY podcast. Thanks for coming on this evening.
Great to be here, Robert.
Now, you were asking me if it was okay for you to have a glass of wine beforehand, and I said, of course. I'm curious what glass you decided to go with this evening.
Barona, actually, I can show you. It's a little Rioja Spanish wine.
Okay, nice.
See, if you see behind me, I got a bit of a wine cellar there, so I collect wine, actually.
Yeah, you're a big wine connoisseur, from my understanding. How'd that all start?
I wouldn't say connoisseur, no. Actually, a mutual friend of ours, principal of high school here, Ian Davidson, is a close friend of mine. Funny story, me and my wife went to Dominican Republic back in mid-2000s, and our room got messed up. And part of their payback was to set us up with a sommelier, and back then we didn't know what a sommelier was or what wine was. And we had probably one of the most spectacular food and beverage experiences of our life. And since then, we've been really hooked. It's a big deal to us. We collect. We've got so we got wines put away for our kids from their birth years. So my little girl was born in 2006, so we've got a bunch of wine from 2006 put away for her for special occasions. And my little fellow's an 2008. Same thing. We got a bunch for him, and myself and my wife were married in 2000, so we got a bunch of 2000s, and really about special dates for us. And we consume nice bottles only with friends. We like to share.
I love that. I dabbled more so in the wine just because for myself, working in a restaurant in Ottawa, you kind of learn a little bit about it, and it was so interesting to see that sometimes, depending on the year, the exact same bottle of wine from the exact same location could be worth so much more, in the sense of maybe it was a better oxygen year in California during that time.
I would say you and I don't know the difference, but there are people who do.
Now, see, I don't think anybody should ever drink alone. So I didn't have any wine, but I did bring a Port Wrexham brew, Chasing Sun, to join with you. So hey, cheers to this episode.
Cheers.
If this podcast ends up being any good for you, I hope it can be. I can leave you with this. One of my favorite bottles that I learned about while working in that restaurant was the Seven Peaks bottle. It's a red bottle of wine. It was more or less how I fell in love with it, is because as like a host and a bar back, I didn't really chat with tables too much, so I just kind of memorized the fact that this one was a jammy wine, and it kind of tasted like rhubarb. That's what the wine expert told us. So I always would just reference this wine to people, where they'd be like, oh, like, what do you recommend? As I'd sit them to their table, and then I'd panic and I'd be like, oh, well, like, our Seven Peaks bottle of wine, it's absolutely fantastic. And I would go with this whole story about how my grandfather, he's berry picker, picks rhubarb all the time in Newfoundland, Grand Bank, and it just would always remind me when he'd bring it home, and then my nan would make, like, whether it be a rhubarb jam or pie or stuff like that. And for the most part, that story had a 98% success rate in convincing people to get that bottle of wine, because if they asked me after, hey, what else should I get? What else would you recommend? I go, let me go get your waiter for this evening. So that was my one and only story that I had, and maybe subconsciously, because I recommended the bottle so much, I just became to love it. But yeah, if you've ever tried, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but maybe that should be.
No, but your description of jammy is a very good one. It's one of the ones I like the most, right? Jammy and juicy and dry, obviously, but it's a great descriptor. And you hook people on that pretty quick.
It's always I find like you were saying with the years and the dates, it's the story that you can kind of associate more so than maybe the wine and like the experience and the time of year.
Robert, we wine is special to me and my wife for different reasons, but we always find we don't buy a lot of expensive wines, but we find that our nicer wines are made to share, and that's what wine is about. Wine and food is all about. It's all about breaking bread and having friends around and enjoying times, right? So that's why wine is important to us.
I love it. Now, moving away from the culinary of it all, and before we get into your career path and where you're to currently, I kind of want to get a glimpse of Lloyd growing up and what your childhood was like. And I know you were originally born in Wabash, Labrador, so yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so my family's from here originally, and it's odd that you said Grand Bank because I have family in Grand Bank. But my dad and mom moved to Wabash. I was 9 months old. It was cold, yeah, and it was extremely cold. So I believe that if you go on Facebook and you look hard enough, you'll find a letter that's circulating around, signed by the principal of Menahek, and it talks about temperature extremes, and it says that kindergarten to grade 6 would only be canceled if it was minus 72, and from grade 7 to grade 12 would only be canceled if it was colder than minus 82. So we dealt with different times than people deal with now. Wabash was a great place. It was a real, I guess, for lack of a better word, cultural mosaic, because Wabash was unique in the fact that there was somebody from every community in Newfoundland. So, when you heard the last name Kelly, you knew it was from Gambo. And when you heard the last name Parrott, you knew it was Random Island. And it just went on. I mean, you knew the Ways were from the Northern Peninsula, the Pays were from St. Anthony, and it was a real unique way to get to know the whole province. And I found that very useful later in my life, certainly when I worked as a recruiting officer with the military. We were ultra competitive in sports. We had 3 high schools. So Menahek, LCC, and JRS, all within a 3-kilometer radius of each other. All of them had over 100 students per grade level. So sports was ultra competitive. Wabash was great. It was a great experience. It was the best place in the world to grow up. But we spent our summers here in Claremont every summer, pretty much every summer. Anyhow, my grandparents were here, so we'd come out and hang out here. We had a lot of freedoms, certainly up there with regards to, taking a skidoo when you were 10 or 12 years old and going out in the woods and doing your thing. And we got into mischief, same as most teenagers. We'd hide up at the cabin at young age and sneak our beer away from our parents and all of those types of things. Really unique for me. Both my mom and my dad worked at Wabash Mines. So my mom, well, she wasn't the first person hired at Wabash Mines, lady. She was one of the first. So she was a pioneer with regards to that. So and my parents worked the same shift, 12 hours a day. So they go to work 8 o'clock at night, come home 8 o'clock in the morning, or vice versa. So I had 2 brothers. We were left to our own sometimes. So we learned to cook at a young age and learned to iron clothes, and we all worked hard. And I wouldn't change it. It was a great way to grow up.
How many snow days did you have going through high school with the?
Not a lot. I mean, listen, we didn't have snow days, but we did have lots canceled for cold. But if it was stormy, just snow and wind and stuff, not like here, school didn't get canceled. And I guess the difference is that everyone got a bus, and if you didn't get the bus, I mean, if you were late for the bus, you took your skidoo or done whatever. But school was certainly not canceled as frequently as it is now. It was different times, right?
No, 100%. And it's funny for myself, universities hardly get canceled. So like when I was going through the Ottawa days in Sandy Hill, we'd get dumped with snow and trying to have Sandy Hill is called Sandy Hill because it's all hills. So trying to get up over the hills and the pile of snows and stuff like that, because they would just never cancel the snow for a snow day, right? It'd be very rare. I was very jealous sometimes when I see my younger sister get a snow day for a few inches.
So interesting fact, I lived in Ottawa for a few years, and my brother is actually a fire captain at the Ottawa airport. And I would argue on the cold days, Ottawa is much colder than Labrador was. And I guess because of the humidity, it was a much damper cold. And it was pretty harsh climate when it was cold in Ottawa, for sure.
When I was talking to my friends from Ontario on that, region, I was getting a whole bunch of, well, like, you're from Newfoundland, you should be used to the cold. And I'm like, Newfoundland, like, our weather, the only thing consistent about our weather is that it's inconsistent. And like, it's not that cold, like, it's just rains and all that. I was like, this is a new cold that I've never experienced before. Like, it's
Yeah.
much worse.
My grandfather would say it was a lazy wind. It was too lazy to go through you or go around you, go right through you. So,
100%. Now, with in regards to, moving on through the high school days, when you were kind of navigating what you wanted to do with the rest of your life, what really went into making those specific decisions?
I just wanted to get out of there, to be honest. So at a young age, I did a scuba diving certification, and I really wanted to be a diver. But obviously back then it was tough. There was a school out of Kelowna, BC, that myself and another fellow, Ed Carter, were accepted to go to. It was just an exorbitant cost. School was based out of Kelowna, but the education part of it was in the Grand Caymans. So you can imagine what that cost back in 1990. And I didn't know if I wanted to go to university or what I wanted to do. And I was an ultra competitive athlete, played all kinds of sports, excelled in a lot of them. And I kind of thought if I joined the military, I'd have an opportunity to carry on with my sporting career and be a soldier all at the same time. So that's the avenue I took. So in 1991, I joined the military, and off I went.
Now, for my generation, I was born in 97. And, part two, the reason why I think this has never really come across my mind in terms of, joining the military and uh, serving for the country is, for people like yourself who have made sacrifices and served for, our country and whatnot. So first off, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Now, with, guys like yourself serving, what really made it for you where that was something that you wanted to do with your life is, serve your country?
Um, yeah, so I guess like we were brought up, and we always gave to community, and we were always charitable. And my mom and dad were very giving people, and it wasn't really a decision. I don't think it was kind of a calling, and so I don't even really know. I mean, I guess because of the thought of being a part of a team, and everything associated with being in the military is really what drew me there. Um, at a young age, I had some leadership skills that I displayed. I've been president of the graduation class and different things, and captain of sports teams and different stuff. And it's just where I landed, and for no other reason other than I don't even know. It's a great question. I guess it's much the same as politics. It's never something that I had on my radar. I know my wife would tell you that's not true, but I will tell you that we've always done what we could for people, no matter what the circumstances, and be that snow blowing someone's driveway, or throwing money where we could to help someone, or helping fundraise for a charity. So it was just an easy decision, and one I don't regret for sure.
Now, when you first joined, what were some of the things that you really started to take away and learn? And I guess almost a learning curve in that whole new environment for you?
So I always reflect on basic training, and for the first 3 months, I didn't really think my mother was very nice because of some of the things people were telling me my mother was. But yeah, I won't swear or tell you any of the things that are told. But listen, you become a cohesive unit pretty quick, and the whole idea of the military initially is to break people down and rebuild them. Not into a mold, but just to I guess expose people's weaknesses so they understand their strengths. And I've always said, a lot of people will ask me what I think my greatest strength is, and my quick answer is that I understand my weaknesses. And I think if you understand your weaknesses, and you utilize other people's strengths in order to build on your weaknesses, then it serves you not only from a leadership standpoint, but it serves you in life with everything you do. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't face the things that you feel you're weak at, or you shouldn't try to do them, but you need to understand that you're going to have to work a little harder to be skillful or masterful at those things, right?
Now, when your weaknesses are getting pointed out to you, is that somebody externally telling you, or is that kind of an impersonal reflection?
Bit of A and a bit of B. I mean, if you don't notice them yourself, then Robert, if you don't see things yourself clearly, it's no good for someone to point them out, because if they do, you still won't see them, right?
I want to clarify, how old were you at this time?
So I was 18 when I joined the military, right out of high school.
Okay. Now, as an 18-year-old, and I'll speak on personal experience, I don't want to hear what anybody older has to, try and tell me to do, because I'm the BN see all end all, or whatever that saying is. I know everything, nobody else knows anything, right? So like, don't even try and tell me I'm wrong. How are like, when people are, constantly trying to showcase you your weaknesses at that age and get you to recognize, I mean, at 18, how are you doing that?
My guess is you listened way better than I did at 18. So anybody who knows me will tell you at 18 I was a badass, didn't care for no one or nothing, and it was a very steep climb. But I'll also say you had no other alternative, and so definitely a different experience for people. And again, while you go through it, it's very tough, and when you look back on it, it's something you reflect on, and you say you enjoy. Just recently, actually, back to Ian and fellow Corey Miller came to my house, and I went through basic training with Corey. I hadn't seen him in 25 or 26 years. He's married to a lady from here in Claremont, and we got talking, and it was as if we, had never left each other's side, and you form pretty strong bonds pretty quickly. And listen, when you're down and out in life, and you're pretty low when you're going through basic training, and you don't have access to the outside world or any of that kind of stuff, and the bonds you form are they're lifetime bonds for sure.
What were some of the weaknesses that you kind of pointed out in yourself, I guess, that you wanted to work on?
Listening. No, I guess listen. So there's one thing I always say to people is that I was always the person who leapt before I looked, and a great quality in a soldier, but not necessarily a great quality to get you through life. So I learned very quickly to assess situations and understand, to read the entire situation, and make sound decisions prior to just jumping in. I had really struggled with, when you write a text and you should wait 5 minutes or read it again before you send it. So I struggled with that, and I think I've certainly developed that kind of a skill now. But I would say my biggest weakness was, my ability to take things on head on all the time and not sit back and assess the situation. So a fighter or a scrapper is a good thing, right? But it's not always the solution. So sometimes you need to sit back and understand that there's more at play than your own opinion or your own thoughts, or so I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned. Always a great team player, but always a strong leader. And as a team player, if you're going to be a good leader, you need to listen, right? So listening skills were not at my forefront back then.
Almost in a way, keeping yourself humble throughout as well.
I've always been pretty humble, and much. I would say empathy is a huge characteristic of mine. I've always looked at people and considered their thoughts and emotions, and tried to place myself in their situation. And the reality of it is no matter what you go through in life, there's somebody who has it much worse. And believe me, I've had struggles in my life, and anybody who knows me will tell you that. And I think I've come through them pretty good. I think I've taken great lessons from my struggles. And at the end of the day, if you don't learn from your low points, then listen. Anyone can climb a mountain. I learned that a long time ago. It's not how you climb a mountain that's going to determine who you are. It's how you walk through the valleys. The low points in your life will always, always, always determine who you are. If you don't learn from mistakes, that's why we make mistakes, right?
A thought process I always try and practice for myself is: a mistake is only a mistake if it happens twice.
True story. True story. Yeah. Yeah. And that might not be a mistake, then sometimes that's stupidity.
With in terms of, still on the topic of basic training, what's something that don't miss whatsoever with those days? Was it like the
Oh my God, that's 30 years ago. Yeah, no. Listen, it was great times. It really was. It was a
Mhm.
struggle when you went through. But at the end of the day, the bond you created, the situations you went through, and the lessons that you learned coming through boot camp was irreplaceable. Actually, we were one of the last courses to go through where they were extremely hard on you. In, I believe, 93 or 94, everything changed when they moved. They shut down Cornwallis and moved it all to Saint Jean, Quebec, and things changed then. But yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the most terrible thing you could ever do while you're doing it. But when it's over, like I said, you look back and I suspect that marathon runners feel the same way, right? They struggle the whole way through, and when they cross that finish line, there's such a feeling of euphoria that they want to do it again, kind of thing. So I suspect it's very similar to that.
how is it I mean, obviously in pop culture, there's a lot of movies that depict those boot camps. Do you find that that's a good representation of how it actually is?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of it was very similar. It was very rough. It was very physically and mentally challenging, and a lot of cursing. And I sent you a text last night and said, "Excuse me." I said, "Do you mind if I curse?" And I always do my best not to curse, but sometimes it comes quite naturally. And that old saying, he swears like a soldier or swears like a sailor, is a very true adage, and it's because they heard it so much, right?
Now, you mentioned that euphoric moment in terms of marathon runners when they finally complete the race. When you complete that stage of your life, how are you feeling right after?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So you go and you do things, and then you separate from the group of people you're with, and you pursue your career, right? So for me, I was a resource management specialist. So I went on to TQ training and stuff, and my career was spanned with. I worked some time in recruiting, and I went to spent time at 2RCR, which was an infantry unit, and I finished my career off with 103 Search and Rescue, which was very exciting. Now, my career spanned 21 years, partially uh, as a soldier and partially as a civilian. And I think, I don't need to tell you, I'm pretty sure I got injured pretty bad. And it's not something I get into a whole lot, but I will say, I was in a training accident. I ended up losing my leg in 2007. And I think that has had more of an imprint on me than outside of children and marriage, pretty much anything. It was a life changing moment, and I had two choices to make: embrace and take advantage, or give up. And I would say, given an opportunity to change anything in my life, including the loss of my leg, not a chance. I'm pretty happy with who I am, and very happy with the journey that's brought me to where I am. So
That's a moment where, nobody's really going to prepare you on how to, mentally get through that. What do you think were some big key pillars for yourself that really helped you lay that foundation to, like you said, continue on?
my wife, for sure. My wife had met me after I was injured, and I would argue that she met me at the lowest point in my life, and seen things in me that I didn't see in myself. And it's kind of funny. I spoke at a leadership conference a while ago. I talked to teachers who see things in students, and I had three teachers in particular who saw things in me I didn't see in myself. But my wife seen things in me that I didn't see in myself. Um, and our little girl was about 9 months old when I ended up losing my leg. So certainly huge influence. And listen, I think anybody, like I said, anybody who knows me knows I'm a very resilient individual. I'll say this without getting into too many details. My parents loved us, and they were great parents. They were awesome, but they had some of their own demons and issues that they dealt with that we had to deal with. So that doesn't mean that they weren't great parents. It just means that we learned some skills at a very young age that helped us later in life. That for me, after I lost my leg, there was no decision. I mean, it was carry on, carry on, and I strongly believe it's had a very positive influence on me, not negative whatsoever. That doesn't mean it wasn't difficult or trying, or it doesn't mean there wasn't parts of my life when I felt like it was unfair, but it's allowed me to meet and do things that I never would have had the opportunity to do. You know, I've been a mentor for lots of amputees and soldiers, and yeah, it's a terrible situation. And I think I did the best to turn it into a positive situation.
Now
I
I know.
wish I was skinnier. I wish I was, I was very active and very fit prior to that, and I'm not as active and as fit as I'd like to be. But that's my only complaint right now. And I will tell you, that's my fault. It's got nothing to do with my leg, and my wife would tell you the same. Sometimes I use it as an excuse, but it's just that, an excuse.
I know you mentioned in the early stages you wanted to, join the military to also hold on to that athlete spectrum of yourself and your identity. So when your accident happens and you end up losing your leg, I assume you're struggling with holding on to that athlete part of your identity as well.
Yeah, so I guess that happened prior to. I had 21 surgeries before I lost my leg, trying to keep my leg. So it was it's a long story, and an hour and a half don't do it justice. But I did initially really struggle, and I think that was the biggest struggle was not the fitness part, but the team part, the camaraderie part. And I was single, so put it in perspective. When I got injured, my wife wasn't in my life, and so I was pretty alone, right? I mean, I was living in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I didn't have my mom, dad, brothers, sisters, my wife, no one, right? So you cope with things, and certainly based on the injury, the amount of surgeries and different medications that they had me on, it was tough time. It was tough for sure. Um, if you're a team player, being a part of a team, be it as a coach or be it a player, or be it as someone who's taking pictures or doing stats, you're a part of that team. And when that's taken away from you, it's that's loss in itself, right? So for me, I was ultra competitive. I was competitive in my military career, competitive in sports, competitive in every aspect of my life. And then I was on my ass, lived down in the bed for a long time, not knowing what was going to happen. Very early, they said I would probably lose my leg, and of course, doctors, they fought to keep it, and it got to a point where it just wasn't feasible, and different infections were setting in and different things, and so on January 50, 2007, it's I lost my leg. I went to this funny story. I went to another center on I think it was March the 5th for what was supposed to be a 6-week rehab stint. And 5 days later, with a temporary prosthetic, I walked out of there. And I ended up being treated as an outpatient. And in May, I filmed my first video of me running with a running prosthetic. So my recovery was exponentially fast, partially because of the type of surgery I had and partially because I'm stubborn. But it went very well for me compared to what I've seen from other people, right?
Are there any other elements that you think a credit to that speedy recovery?
I had a different surgery. I had the first, it was called an early amputation. It's the first one that was ever done in Canada. So I was fortunate in that fact, and it's worth Googling. Erdl is, so they took a piece of bone from my tibia, between my tib and fib, and they fused it using the periosteum, which is the sac that surrounds your bone. So the bone actually grew back a bridge. So I had no scissoring of my two bones. It's long, I can tell you the details of the surgery, but irregardless, that certainly would have been a key factor. And oddly enough, one of the reasons I got involved in politics, because I believe we need to be more concerned with outcomes than we are with the cost of doing something. So the outcome for me was my amputation, had it been just a standard below knee fish lip, is what they call it, amputation would have took about 30 minutes. And I probably would still be having troubles with neuropathies and different pain, like phantom pain and different stuff. I had an early amputation. I was in the OR for about 6 hours, and I haven't had trouble since. Um, I believe 6 hours invested in that surgery paid off tenfold, not just for me, but for the healthcare system.
Hmm. Now, take me through the months after like that surgery and the years after, and where how it followed.
Yeah, so I was working with 103 Search and Rescue. Went right back to work. I was a maintenance planner for the Cameron helicopter, and I missed very little time. I had the amputation in January 15th, and I was back to work in May. Actually, had to fight with the insurance company to let me go back to work, and went back to work, and we just seen things through. Actually, had another little boy in 2008, and we lived a very active lifestyle. We camped a lot and hiked a lot and mountain bikes and all that good stuff. And we're still avid skidooers and boaters, and we live an active lifestyle in the community and outside the community. In 2011, my wife had an opportunity to come back here to Carnival, where she started off as oddly a bank teller. And I know your mom is an assistant manager, I believe.
Yeah.
So she had the opportunity to come back here to the bank. She started in as a teller to be the manager. And so I could retire, and so we said, let's do that. So she came back, and we commuted back. I commuted back and forth to Gander. I stayed with Search and Rescue for a little while. I mean, partially out of necessity for them; they couldn't get backfill for me. And then I ended up going to work offshore oil and gas construction, and just totally jumped into an entirely different career from a business standpoint, and excelled. Went to work, did very well. We spent 9 years. Started off running one company. In the end, I was the general manager over three at the same time, and the manager of operations over a group of 8 companies that were right across Canada. So basically perseverance and hard work, not necessarily brains. I believe that hard work is the answer to everything. I truly do. I mean, if you work hard enough and you believe in yourself and you take the time to listen to others and embrace the things that are around you, you can be successful at anything.
I want to just go back to the period of time where you said you returned to work before you retired there. And because we've kind of talked about, athletes in a way, I'll use the analogy where when an athlete gets injured, some people say like, and even they might reflect on themselves when they come back, they're never like fully mentally there because they're kind of cautious about, what they sustained before. Did you find that was like a relevant factor or obstacle when you returned?
I tell you now, I went to my doctor and I asked to go back to work, and he kind of thought that I should be staying off long term. Even mentioned the word CPP and different things, and so my response was, "There's more to work than the work part of it." And he said, "What are you talking about?" So, well, to me, it's the most social thing I do, and to be a part of a team, and it was very important to me. So no, I went back to work and head first, and so you got to understand too. I had worked 6 years through 20 odd surgeries, missed very little time, with the exception of time in hospital. Wore a brace, walked with a cane. Losing my leg was actually quite liberating for me, right? I went from using aids to walk to being able to run. So it was, as harsh as it sounds, it was very liberating. I had chronic pain every day. So I had what was called, there's different names: reflex sympathetic dystrophy, causalgia. Back in the old days, they used to call it, but it was hypersensitive sympathetic nervous system. So if I got on a ferry, or if I went into a bar where music was loud, that would hurt me worse than somebody slamming a hammer up against my leg. So it was very heightened sensitivity. And when I lost my leg, all that was gone. So I woke up from surgery relieved, which I know sounds a bit strange, but very true. And not necessarily relieved knowing what I had to go through, but relieved from a pain standpoint.
The moment when you retire and close that chapter on your military service, what was the initial response and emotions going through your head?
Tough, tough. Still reflect, still miss, still keep in contact with all my old friends and stuff, and entirely different world leaving a military situation. Like you got to think when you, yeah, we do things from a risk standpoint on a daily basis, where the real world looks at risk in an adverse way and tries to avoid it. So you trust the people that you work with, you form bonds that you wouldn't form in a lot of other work situations, lifelong bonds. So still very close to a lot of people I served with, and it's important. It's important to have those bonds.
Now, you mentioned the next kind of career path for you was the oil and gas industry. Moving into that realm of things, what did the day to day kind of look like for yourself?
Yeah, so it was construction was yeah, it was a blur initially. So I went to work a company called at the time Parsons Trucking, furthest thing from a trucking company. They later became PTL Services, which was the Parsons Trucking change. They got bought out. Yeah, so we did a lot of the work for the refinery. We were the third biggest contractor for Hebron when it was built. I was actually on the board of directors for the Hebron project while it was being built. I was uh, from the contractor standpoint. Extremely busy. Probably the busiest I've ever been in my life. I mean, we had 250 odd pieces of equipment, 150 something full time people during shutdowns at the refinery and peaks at Long Harbor and Hebron. More than that, we were doing between 25 and 28 million dollars business a year, and all new to me. So, look, the reality of it was I believe I was very good at my job, but it was a steep learning curve for me, and it was busy. It was busy. It was a 24/7. If you don't look after people, they don't work. And I think is probably why I excelled, because I was very concerned about my staff, and I understood that they needed to make a paycheck, and I understood that the company needed to make money, and I poured myself into it, and we excelled. I mean, we did extremely well, extremely well.
You mentioned numbers of like 28 million. Obviously, that's unfathomable for a lot of people to even kind of be around and have to deal with in their occupation. What's going through your head when you're kind of seeing figures like that?
It's just zeros. You surround yourself with good people. I had great people working with me, and always, again, like I say, you recognize your strengths and your weaknesses. So, from a negotiation and business standpoint, I excel at a boardroom table. From a number standpoint, I had people that were there that I knew the questions. I knew stuff I could do, but I had people who were doing a lot of that for me. So, I think in order to be a good leader, you have to trust the people you have working for you too. So, leadership management, it's just a different word. So, I had a group of people who I had brought in. I trusted. They knew my expectations, and it worked well. Worked very well.
Now, this is an industry that, is constantly more or less battling back and forth with, two different groups of people where, you have the renewable energy side of things, and there's that debate in terms of, environmentally friendly and everything in terms of that nature. When you're hearing and listening to some of these different stories, especially, the states are uh, a leader, I would say, in terms of their decisions in terms of oil and gas industry, and whether or not they're looking more renewable. When you're hearing all this, how do you take all that stuff in?
Listen, I got involved in politics because I don't believe there's a future for my kids here in this province if things don't change. I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I believe that we need to find a way to change now. But I'll say this: we do not have a green future in Newfoundland without a black president. If you look to Muskrat Falls, there's people pointing fingers at everything. There's enough blame with Muskrat Falls to go around to everyone. And if you want after, I can explain why I say that. But what I will say to you is Muskrat Falls is put this province on the edge of bankruptcy. And that is the cost of green energy. So we can sit here on our high horses all day long and talk about the necessity for green energy. But I will tell you, unless we find a way to pay for it, we cannot afford it. We have proven that. Muskrat Falls is the cost of green energy. When Muskrat Falls comes online, Newfoundland will have about 98% of its power will come from renewable resource, which is great, but the cost is exorbitant. So if we want a path forward with green energy, be that wind or solar or more hydro, we need to have an alternative to get to that point. So the alternative isn't to utilize and ship in dirty Saudi oil. We've got the cleanest oil in the world sitting offshore. We should be utilizing our resources right now, and not just oil and gas. I mean, we should be looking to our forestry and agriculture, and fishery, and mining resources, and we should be finding a way to maximize them. And we don't. We give everything away. The issue is, and this isn't a rant about Quebec. The issue is that we take these resources out of the ground, and nobody looks at secondary processing. Even we can't even grow weed right. Think about it. So we get these large facilities growing weed, and we ship it off to Ontario to get it packaged. It doesn't make sense. We've got fish plants here shipping, certainly our salmon aquaculture industry, most of them get shipped to New Brunswick to get packaged. Why? If you think about some of the things that we do, and we shouldn't have to validate putting Newfoundlanders and Labradorians first. We need to put our own resources and our own people first. And that's the only way we're going to get ahead. That's the only way we can have a green future. We've got to have joint management of the fishery. We've got to have an oil and gas sector that thrives. It's not, nobody's going to flick a switch and make that go away. I do believe we need to get away from oil and gas for sure, but that's 30, 40 years down the road. So, from an environmental standpoint, green energy, I'm all about it. I want my kids to have a green future. I said to you, one of the things we like to do is scuba dive. My kid likes, Gavin loves the snowboard. We like being out in nature. We hike, we do things, all things I love and enjoy. And growing up in Labrador, we spent all our time in the woods. I think it's a big part of Newfoundland. And I also think it's a huge part of our tourism industry. If we want to, grow and expand our tourism industry, it has to be an ecotourism. There's no question about that. But again, I'll say, there's no green future in this province without a black president. If we don't find a way to pay for a green future, there is none.
What you mentioned in terms of, you say if I wanted to have you explain the comment with Muskrat Falls, could you elaborate more with that one?
Sure. So let's just say, for anyone who's watching this who understands bidding or engineers or whatever, when a price is given, it's done based on an order of magnitude, plus or minus 25%. So let's go back to Danny Williams and the dream of Muskrat Falls. I believe the number was 6.9 billion, order of magnitude plus or minus 25%, which probably would have brought it up to 8.2. The number that's thrown around now all the time is a number that includes interest. So the original number certainly would not have included interest. So secondarily to that, Kathy Dunderdale, when she ran, her platform was 2 words, Muskrat and Falls. And we, the public, we voted her in. And we believe Muskrat Falls was a good project. Now, I would argue that Muskrat Falls was a good project. If you look at the man hours that were worked by Newfoundlanders, we have paid salaries in excess of $2.6 billion to people in this province. Just imagine where we'd be financially today if the men and women that were working in Muskrat Falls didn't have that money, didn't have those jobs. The mess we're in today would have happened earlier, there's no question. But that doesn't substantiate it. So 7 years now, this current administration has had the opportunity to correct all the wrongs of Muskrat Falls, including canceling it if it was such a bad project. For 7 years, they've had the opportunity to fire the Gilbert Bennetts and all the people that were supposedly poisoned in this contract. That hasn't happened. And for 7 years, they've had an opportunity to change the constructability process and the planning process for Muskrat Falls. None of that has happened. We have flown and set up power lines through Mealy and Torngate Mountains in the middle of winter. We have dug through 17 and 18 feet of snow to construct and erect power lines in the middle of the winter that still aren't polarized. We had helicopters flying when it was never part of the plan. We've spent so much money trying to fast track Muskrat Falls when they knew all along it couldn't be fast tracked and it wouldn't happen. We should have done the power lines in the summer. It could have been managed so much better. And I'll say this, Nalcor, first mistake was we tried to build it ourselves, which made no sense. Nalcor went out and hired a bunch of oil and gas people to build power line. Don't make sense. Don't make sense whatsoever. Contractors, subcontractors, people that were trying to build were working with the tools they were given. Instead of working with contractors, it was a blame game right from the word go. And I know this because we did work on Muskrat Falls. I believe there's lots of blame to go around. Here we are 7 years later, and it's still not working. And there's still lots of secrets and lots of things happening. So while Danny dreamt it and Kathy sanctioned it, the Liberals have built it. And so there's lots of levels of failure here. I believe there's loads of blame to go around. And I believe that it's time that we all realize that we have it right around no matter what it is. It will end up being a good project once it gets going. We hear people complain about the cost of power. What bothers me is I never hear anyone complain about the cost of food. You know, we live on an island where we pay double for everything. So put it in perspective, if you, my little boy likes Swanson turkey dinners. So Swanson turkey dinner comes here on a tractor trailer, and if you think about it, we pay, I don't know, maybe $4 for it. Nova Scotia probably costs $2. But because it's processed food, you pay tax on it. So we don't just pay $4, we pay $4 plus tax. Nova Scotia pays $2 plus tax. In the very instance that we pay double the cost and double the tax. We don't complain about that. We need to find ways to fix those types of things. Our issue is not electricity. Our issue is the ferry system, the freight system, the logistics of getting things here to the island. We have lots of things we can solve.
That was one thing I noticed a lot actually living away and, working in some volunteer things, even, seeing what's going on in the territories and, the cost of like lettuces and stuff like that is almost, 4 times the amount of where it is in other parts of the country. The information that you just reiterated to me, was that something that you would credit to acquiring being on these boards, or was just always kind of a passion of yours beforehand?
No, I mean, I would say if you work around people in industry, you're akin to pick up some different information for sure. Listen, nobody loves Newfoundland and Labrador more than I do. It's my home. The minute I left here, the very first thing I tried to do was get back here. So it's a big interest of mine. Newfoundland, it's a big passion of mine. I always look to rotational workers. When I did a speech in the House of Assembly, we were talking about rotational workers, and I don't even know why I said this, because I don't write speeches. Anyone who knows me knows when I stand up in the House, I speak from my heart. But I said, rotational workers don't work away because they want to leave Newfoundland. They work away because they want to live here. And we're all like that, I mean, we've got a fighting spirit, and Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are so proud of where they're from, and they love where they're from. And that's where I speak from and where I come from. I believe we've got some serious issues, but I also believe we can fix them. I really do. I think we're in a place in history where there's an opportunity to fix a lot of the wrongs that we've done. And I believe it's much simpler than a lot of people think. And I think it starts with putting Newfoundlanders and Labradorians first. And I say that from a procurement standpoint, from an employment standpoint, and just from a me and you standpoint. So, for me, I go and everything I can do local, I do local. And when I mean local, I mean if I can keep it here in the district I represent, that's where I go. Now, that doesn't mean I don't go to St. John's to buy some stuff. I do. I go to Costco, no different than anyone else. But we do our best to keep things local. And I think if, as a province and as a people, we took that as an attitude, right from government on down, it would make such a huge difference. Small business struggles because we don't support them. You know, when we are, as an example, the mental health facility is being built in St. John's right now. They're doing underground, or not the underground, but they're doing the parking garage. They're doing simple concrete and rebar work. We've got lots of people in Newfoundland qualified to do it. We've got contractors from Quebec during COVID, during the pandemic, in St. John's, building a parking garage, doing standard concrete formwork. It makes no sense. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting that a private business can't employ people from elsewhere, but I do believe if it's a public project, such as these 3Ps or anything that government has an investment in, we have an obligation to ensure it's Newfoundlanders working on it. An obligation. And the obligation is to the people that pay taxes here. And listen, if it costs $50 an hour to pay a Newfoundlander, and it costs $45 an hour to pay someone from Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Quebec, we know that the $50 is going to be spent here. So we're way further on. It's a simple process, and we need to start there for sure.
Now, can you tell me about some of the other boards that you've worked on throughout? It's funny enough. I mean, I don't want to out Wikipedia as being one of my research things, but obviously sometimes there's limited information. I love the Wikipedia statement where it just goes, worked on many boards, like no context. So I'm curious about some more of those opportunities you found
Yeah,
yourself.
so I sat on the board of directors for the Hebron project,
Mm.
and I sat on the board of directors for the Construction Labor Relations Association of the province, and I was actually on the executive council for that. So sat on the board of directors for White Hills for the ADAC here locally, and I was a professional, still am actually a trustee for a health and welfare and pension fund for one of the unions, and I actually two unions. So yeah,
Are you taking different learning lessons from each of those opportunities?
every day, every day. If you're not evolving, you're falling behind. Absolutely.
At the same time, is that when your politics career kind of started with town council, or does the board members kind of end then you fall into town council?
No, so at town council, when I was on town council here in Campbell, I was the general manager over Blackhawk Industrial, CSL, and PTL, three separate companies. I was manager of operations for the full Talon group of companies. I was on the board of directors for the CLRA, board of directors for Hebron, board of directors for White Hills, all at the same time. It was a busy time in my life for sure. Yeah.
What did you find specifically about town council that you kind of took away for lessons, and what were some of the things that you really were passionate with working on within there?
So town council was an eye opener for me. Obviously, on a municipal level, you think that change is easy to incite and stuff, and so it was a very quick learning curve. You find out quickly, as much as you want to make change quick, it isn't going to happen. I found out that a lot of municipalities, not just Claremont as an example, but in Newfoundland, don't get support from provincial government that they should. Uh, to me, Claremont is a great example of communities, how communities should operate in a sense. And there's lots of people in Claremont who will disagree with me. When I look at Claremont and some of the things that they're able to do without government assistance, it's mind-blowing when you think about other communities that depend 100% on government assistance. And Claremont is a great example of regionalization, but they don't get assistance with regionalization. I say that when you look to, for example, excuse me, when you look to the event center here and you consider that they're operating at a loss and about 50% of the user group comes from outside of the town, and the town still pays for it. And you look at White Hills, who gets little or no support from provincial government, not near what they should get. I actually believe White Hills should be the centerpiece of recreation for the entire area, but it's a different conversation. Council, showed me that through resilience and hard work behind the scenes, there's things you can achieve, but obviously you need government assistance in order to move some of the things forward, right? And a good example of that is the bridge here in Claremont.
So now when you decide to run and try and be a member of the House of Assembly there, what really, I guess, struck that decision?
Um, Strangely, I was approached by both parties, asked if I would consider running for both. Um, I won't say it was something I had on my radar, but I won't say it was something I didn't have on my radar. Obviously, it intrigued me. I turned down a significant amount of money and a significant job offer in order to pursue politics, and I did so. I turned the job down in the morning and announced I was going to run for politics in the afternoon. So I did so as a leap of faith. A lot of heartfelt conversations between my wife and my two children, who were at the time 11 and 13, and we decided, because I felt strongly that I could make a difference, and I still feel strongly that I can make a real difference. That is what we wanted to do. Claremont is my home. It's where I live, right here in the district of Terra Nova. One of the deciding things for me was we took out a map and looked at other districts in the province and kind of said, what's different and what's the same. And the greatest comparison I find between Claremont district of Terra Nova and other districts is you looked at Grossmorn. So I always said, if you look at Terra Nova National Park, to the northeast is the Eastport Peninsula, which is one of the most visited portions of the province. Right after Bonavista, I believe it's the fourth or fifth most visited. And statistically, it's changed since then. So I believe back then it was fourth. And then you look to the national park, and then you look to the surrounding communities, and you look to the southeast, and you got Claremont and the Bonavista Peninsula, and you compare that to Grossmorn, and you say, what the hell is going on here? And really, that's what went through my head. I mean, you drive through Grossmorn, every kilometer, there's a sign, there's, support for the communities around, the ability for them to advertise and excel in both the summer and winter tourism that we don't see here. I mean, we've got Charlottetown and the Eastport Peninsula that are landlocked by the Terra Nova National Park. No access in or out by quad or skidoo. They've been fighting for years to get that access. We've got a ski hill here and golf resorts and things that should be attracting people from all over. You got the Bonavista Peninsula, which gets 95,000 visitors a year. And prior to Bear Mountain Cafe opening up, I would say that maybe only 10 of them stopped in Claremont for a cup of coffee. So there's, and I'm not saying that we did things wrong. I'm just saying that I believe we were overlooked. I believe that the entire district was overlooked. I believe that Eastport did its own thing. I believe that Charlottetown did its own thing. And I believe that, Claremont and Random Island and those smaller communities did their own thing. So, for me, it was part of my decision-making process was saying, how can I help change this? And, I fought to get access for Eastport and Charlottetown. And it's unfortunate that we don't get support from our federal counterparts, and to be quite honest, even our provincial counterparts. And I believe change will come. I believe it will happen. Obviously, 19 months and 11 months of that in lockdown with COVID has made a serious impact on our ability to move forward. But I do believe that I've achieved more in 19 months than a lot of people do in a 4-year term. So I'm proud of what I've done, and I stand by my record.
I just want to be clear on your district. So, for anybody listening, it's the District of Terra Nova, which stems from all the way in that Terra Nova, Port Blanford area to Milton. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So it goes from Glovertown.
Okay.
All of the Eastport Peninsula, including St. Brendan's Island, to Random Island, and all the way down Southwest Arm as far as Gooseberry Cove and Southport. And so we stop at Milton, that's the cutoff, and we stop at Goobies, that's the cutoff, and Glovertown. So it's huge. It's 60. Now, I believe it's 6,200 square kilometers, 42 communities, I think 10 municipalities and 11 local service districts. It's huge. It's a big district. It's a lot of geography and small communities and different issues. And, if you think about being an MHA, so interesting fact, our district is the only district in Newfoundland that I believe straddles different healthcare authorities and different authorities for everything. So when you get to Charlottetown, everything is part of Central, and everything east of Charlottetown is part of Eastern. So it's very challenging. The bureaucracy is twice as much. Yeah, it's a difficult job for sure. And then if you look at different centers for certain like St. John's and stuff, they don't have to worry about road work and ferries, and we've got a lot on our plate here for sure. We've got a lot on our plate.
No, I'm glad we just clarified the geographical location of it all, because I mean, I grew up in Claremont. I didn't even really realize it extended that much of it all, right? So now you mentioned you were approached by both parties. When you're making that decision of picking who to kind of associate yourself with, I mean, what chose you and led you down the conservative path?
So I would say I'm I'm very liberal, but I'm conservative leaning, I guess. And what I mean by that is, in my thoughts, I'm very liberal. You know, I fight for people, right? Regardless of their stripe or their stand, and I believe that people have rights, and I will never back down from that. And I got involved in politics to represent my district, not to represent a party. I'll also say, um, I believe uh, that we need to be fiscally conservative and we need to find a way to move the province forward. So while I'm very progressive, I'm fiscally conservative, and I think that we need to find a better way to spend money. Listen, I'll tell you, I look at politicians and I look at bureaucrats, and I look at the amount of people who think that they're, I don't want to sound too brash, but smarter or better for no other reason than the fact that they're there in a position. There's too many people in government and in politics that think they invented the wheel and they don't know how to change a tire. And we need people who know how to change tires. We need change. We really do. I believe, you know, a lot of people can't take the chest because he's not charismatic and he's not cute. And he's not all the things that we look for in a politician. But now is not the time for politicians. Now it's time for leaders. And I believe that Chess will make good decisions. And I know, I don't believe, I know Chess listens to his caucus. If Chess is, if he's looking for advice, he calls his caucus. He leans on the people inside that he feels is stronger people. And I made a comment to you earlier that in order to lead, you have to listen. And he does that. He recognizes his weaknesses. And I agree. Listen, when Chess comes out in front of a camera, it's not, it's not all flash and it's not cute. But he's the smartest guy in the room. He's the smartest man in the room. And I believe that the Conservative caucus is the best caucus. And I believe that we've got the right team to lead the province forward. And that's not political. If I didn't believe in the team I'm on, I would not be here. Cut and dry. I'm not in this for a paycheck. I could be making more money somewhere else. I'm certainly not in this for the family life it gives me, because this is a lot of sacrifice. I'm in this because I believe I can make a difference. And I believe the team I'm on is the team to make the difference.
Now, over the course of those last 19 months, what are some of the biggest accomplishments that you kind of hold highly and a lot of pride with?
So we passed the private members resolution for Newfoundland Labrador first, where we had 100% support of the House of Assembly. The legislation hasn't passed, but it's a private members resolution that I put forward. It's the first time in I've been told 20 years that the House of Assembly was actually full with spectators. There was that many unemployed men and women there who wanted to see and hear this legislation go forward. Certainly a very big moment for me. Unlike what a lot of people think, I've seen a lot of collaboration in the House of Assembly. That doesn't mean there's not a bunch of bitching and fighting and complaining that goes on TV, but behind the scenes, people work together. I believe personally for our district, myself and my two constituency assistants, Caroline Frost and Susan Dean, we've touched a lot of people personally. and I'll be honest, that's my goal. My goal is to help people. My goal is to better situations and help people. And we've been able to do that every day. And while I will say we get the odd complaint for people who say I'm no good and I never helped them, it's not because we didn't try. And we've been as honest as humanly possible. And sometimes people don't like honesty because it's not the answer they want to hear. But I'm not going to change that. That's who I am. And I will fight for people tooth and nail. And that's not going to change. That's my job. My job is to look after the people who put me here, not to look after the party that I'm a part of.
And I think one of those moments that I think would probably attest and tie in with what you're mentioning and fighting for your party. And it was a moment in the House that kind of went a little viral in terms of, Newfoundland standards is the clip of you speaking about the refinery shutdown. When you're seeing the reaction online after that clip, and a lot of people, especially, in my uh, group on Facebook that I've kind of, took in because for the most part, I was away at that time. So for kind of context, I don't typically see a lot of stuff when I'm away in Ottawa, right? Pertaining to Newfoundland politics. But your speech in that moment in the House, it really took off and it was, pushed enough by like so many people that I seen it on my timeline continuously. When you have a moment like that, especially on the House and that stage, and you're seeing the reaction, what's going through your head?
So we're very clear. I don't pay attention to it. I speak from my heart, and anyone who knows me in the House of Assembly and they see, you can go through my speeches. There's no, I don't read. It's from my head and from my heart. I believe we failed a refiner. I strongly do. Last March, I reached out to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources at the time, Siobhan Cody, and indicated to her that there was a sale pending, and they brushed it off. And that was probably at 9:30 in the morning, and at 11 o'clock that morning, it was announced, and they were caught off guard. While government has argued time and time again that it's no place for them to be involved in a private sale, I would say the one time I'm going to swear that's utter bullshit. We hold 100% of the environmental responsibility for that refinery as a province. It's the government's responsibility should it fail. That means we would be responsible for the cleanup. And I can tell you right now, cleanup of that refinery would ruin the provincial government. So my guess is it would never happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is from a regulatory standpoint, all of the licenses. So, if you look at the regulations surrounding tanks and, the inspections and different things that happen at the refinery, it's the provincial government that issues those licenses. So we own those licenses. Again, our responsibility. We should have been involved right from the word go. We should have understood what the Competition Bureau was afraid of. We should have helped Irving and the refinery negotiate, and it never happened. In my opinion, one of the greatest failures of the Liberal government. Now, they can argue all they want about, the global erosion of the cost of oil and gas and all that. There's no question. There's no question we were going through that. When the Russians and the Saudis got into the bidding war and COVID got involved as a perfect storm, it absolutely affected everything that was happening out there. Does that mean that we couldn't have helped? Absolutely not. They were hands-free from the sale of that refinery up until the moment there was no sale. And to me, that's disgusting. To me, it's an utter failure, and we should have been involved from the word go. So then other companies got involved. There was the talks of a $320 million infusion of money from the feds, which I would argue should have been and ought to have been allowed to be utilized for the refinery. And I say this because, first off, the federal government stipulated where the money could go, which never should have happened. Secondarily, the refinery now refines offshore oil and gas, which to me is incredibly important. And if it was specifically given for offshore oil and gas production and to better the future of offshore oil and gas, then the refinery should have been able to use the money. So here's the other thing I'll say. The day before the election, the Liberals came in on their white horse with a $16.5 or $16.9 million announcement to put the refinery in a warm idle state. So the refinery was already operating in a warm idle state. That's the first thing. Second thing is they said it would create 200 jobs. Again, absolute bullshit. There was already 169 people working at the refinery. It created 31 part-time jobs for a short period of time. The warm idle stand that they're using out there is like owning a house and turning the house on, turning the heat on in the porch and leaving it off in the rest of the house. So I don't think I need to explain that to anyone. What concerns me about the refinery is 100% of our jet fuel, 100% of our propane, a large portion of all of our fuels are produced at that refinery. So we heard today that WestJet pulled out of Newfoundland effective March 19th. Air Canada's had significant reductions. Avis is almost shut down. Provincial airlines have changed all of their tact. And I'll also add that our air access strategy failed before COVID. COVID has certainly made it worse, but it failed prior to COVID. So here we are. Even if we could find a way to bring airlines back, we can't put fuel in the tanks. If it wasn't COVID and restaurants weren't shut down and businesses weren't shut down, we would have run out of propane this year. It's okay to say we're going to ship it in from the island. Propane doesn't come in on oil tankers or boats or anything. It comes in tractor trailers with specialized tanks. Well, there is no amount of tractor trailers on the east coast of Canada that could have supplied us with propane demand under normal circumstances. And everybody's overlooking all of that. The refinery is essential for us as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to move forward. So we're currently now paying 15 cents a litre more than any other province for fuel. I mean, just think of that. So think of how that affects the cost of a tomato or a box of craft dinner. Certainly not a Port Rexton beer, but it might affect a bottle of wine coming from Montreal. The refinery is essential, and essential, to the other part of it is 500 local jobs, spin-off jobs. Excuse me, all of the things that are easy to figure out right in front of us, but all of the things behind the scenes, like this. We've got 3 thermal generation plants that are 100% supplied by fuel by that refinery. It's a pretty scary thought. The government ought to have been involved right from day one.
You kind of broke up there and froze on our end, but I do think the audio came in, so that'll just kind of a little explanation of what happened there for the viewers. But now, so we talked about, what you were most proud of and what you've accomplished over the last 19 months. Now you're seeking, re-election again in the same district. What are kind of your goals and aspirations for the next term show you be re-elected?
So, I mean, obviously, I love nothing more than form government. Now, I do believe strong opposition is extremely important. But, my goal is to make change and be a big part of change. Regardless of who forms government, changes have to come in this next term. So I believe that the skills and the experience that I bring to the table. I've listened to Andrew Parsons stand up in the House of Assembly, the current Minister of Industry and Energy, and toot my horn all the time. He always stands up and says, we need to be listening to the member from Terra Nova. He's come, on multiple occasions. So I would say, I'm going to continue to do what I've always done. I'm going to continue to fight for the people in my district. I'm going to continue to fight for the men and women of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I don't believe that being a fighter is a bad word. And I'm not going to apologize for fighting. At the end of the day, I think that there's too many people that are muzzled, that don't stand up for what they believe in. And I believe that right now we need the people that are as close to the ground and as common as I am. And I think my life experiences and certainly my past career and my personal experiences have brought me to where I am. And I've done, Robert, I've done all the changing I'm going to do. So anybody who's worked with me in the house or anywhere else knows who I am, and I have no intentions of changing that. I've got the ability to stand up and fight. I've got the ability to argue, but I also have the ability to bring common sense and a collaborative approach to the table. And I have the ability to bring a room together and show true leadership. And I really believe that anybody who knows me knows that I'm a leader, and I'm not going to apologize for that, and I will continue to do that if I'm, lucky enough to be reelected. And my empathy and my humbleness towards the people that I represent has always served me well, and my ability to communicate and talk to the men and women who put me here and answer their questions, whether they're tough questions or easy questions. We don't back down from any of them, and that's how I would approach the next term if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Now, reflecting actually on the moment that you found out that you were going to be in office, you ran a successful campaign, and now you're the representative of that district. What was the initial thought process? Was it much celebratory moment? Did you take a moment to enjoy it, or was it like, okay, now we got to get to work?
No, it was very humbling, very humbling. So you mean you got to think you just went through back then in 2019, I believe it was a 35-day election. So really a 5-week interview. Uh, you put yourself out there, you answer questions. I done things a lot differently. I really immersed myself. I ran town hall meetings with 80 and 90 people. I went into a room and I gave a brief introduction to myself. And I sat down and I said, "I'm yours. Ask me questions." And I was grilled, and it worked. And I won't say it worked from a standpoint that I convinced people, but I believed that people believed in me, and I honestly think they still do. I mean, I haven't changed. It's I take the 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls, and if I wake up and there's a message on my phone, I mean, I've gotten, Refiner is a great example. I've gotten voice messages on my phone 4 o'clock in the morning from and very defeated individual crying. Didn't know how they were going to buy Christmas gifts for their kids and stuff. And you know what? I reach out right away. It's who I am and what I am and who I plan on continuing to be. What I will say is, I've signed my name on the line twice for the Queen, and when I joined the military, it was a very um, fulfilling and proud moment in my life, and obviously when I was elected as MHA, it was one of the, outside of my children and my marriage, is one of the proudest days of my life, and it's a big deal, right? You got to think, it was never about me. For me, it's always been about the people who put me there, and that's the plan. Our plan is to always remember that.
And now you mentioned, the phone calls that you received, and people are very defeated and they open up to you and they tell you things. And I'm curious now because I want to look at some of the mental aspects and the tolls that you put yourself through as being a politician. By no means have I had any kind of career in terms of the political world, but I did have a little stint working in politics, over the summer as a summer student one time. And some of the conversations that I've had with people and what people disclose to me, I still struggle with to this day, knowing those conversations, right? And I honestly, in order to kind of move on and get to sleep at night, I almost shut it out at this point. Obviously, I'm like 4 years removed from the position, and I was just a summer student. How are you, living with those call outs every day?
So I embrace them, and if I don't, then it don't work, right? And I know what you're saying. So you don't go through the things that I've gone through in my life and not understand how to deal with stress. And um, my stress and other people's stress are different. And how I deal with stress is different. But as an MHA, and I can't speak for all 40 because every district is different. But we're a rural Newfoundland, and this is rural. I mean, regardless of what people think, we deal with things that not everyone does. So, we deal with homelessness and people in need of food. We're marriage counselors. We're social workers. We're uh, financial counselors. We do a lot of different stuff. So, but Robert, those things that I talk about and the things that people call me about are things that I help people with every single day prior to getting into politics. I mean, I don't say this a whole lot. You know, I actually said it in my bio, and it was. I received a call from a gentleman who I served on the board of directors with for Hebron. He said, "Lloyd, why don't you talk about your charity work?" And this because I don't do charity work for personal gain or popularity, but through my time on the board of directors with Hebron and here locally with Power to Hope and my own affiliation with YAC, you know, I've been a part of distributing almost $5 million in the province of Newfoundland, and it's a big deal to me. You know, it's a big deal, and that doesn't mean I haven't, you know, wept about certain things, or, but I'm super proud to say that, you know, we've Power to Hope, we've raised almost $600,000 in Claremont, the town of 6,000. We've raised about 60% of the budget for H. Bliss Murphy Cancer Care Foundation annually for the last 7 years. And Ryan Power and Nancy Robbins and you know, the whole group, there's 12 or 13 of us, are all a big part of that. But from a fundraising standpoint, I think people would quickly tell you that I'm a key component. I'm a key cog in the wheel. H. Bliss Murphy, you know, when Hebron board was dissolving, we had almost $4 million, and I fought tooth and nail to make sure that every single penny stayed in this province and went to charity. And guess what? It did. We gave $1.56 million to H. Bliss Murphy. We gave money to, you know, multiple charities. I got a list of them. I just don't, you know, excuse me, from diabetes to Stella Circle to YAC to you know, Power to Hope. I've always done that. You know, me and my wife, when we lived in New Brunswick, we, you know, we donated every Christmas 20 or 30 turkeys. And I gotta be honest, at times when we couldn't afford turkey ourselves, we were buying turkey for people. And this is for no other reason than I believe people need a hand up. And we've always been that way. And I tell people now, being the MHA has given me an opportunity to help people in ways I never dreamed. And I can't imagine a better job. No. Is it easy? No, it's not. Do I still got to worry about the potholes in the road and bridges and oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's the key component of my job. But COVID has changed how we do our jobs and everything about our job in the last 11 months. So it's become more personal now, right? So the big project spending and that kind of stuff is, you know, well, it's still happening. It's not at the forefront. And some of the stories that we've dealt with since last March with COVID, and yeah, it would scar a lot of people, and it has. I've been in caucus with my my team. There's 15 of us, and we've had people sitting around a table crying, and you know, it was tough. You have to find a way to separate yourself from it. There's days when I come home and I may not give my wife and children the attention that they need or deserve. And I'll say this election cycle has been a stretch of that, because it's been very difficult election cycle, 35 days trying to meet with people when you're not allowed to meet with people. You got to think of how it all played out. But my wife supports me 100%. My children support me 100%. And the people who know me support me in a big way. The community supports me. And, you know, I'm hoping next week that the vote will tell you how much support I got.
Now, another mental toll that I want to kind of chat about, and you've reflected on it, you know, at the end of the day with politics, it's inevitable. There's going to be people who didn't like you or don't like you, or, you know, point blank say that you're an ass or you're, you know, full of shit. With in terms of that, I mean, you know, especially having to live in a small town, and you know, there were still, I think, in the last election, 2,500 people who voted against you, and you know, you're going out in that community, and you're, you know, out and about, and these people can easily approach you and say these things as well as much as they even can online. You know, how are you dealing with that factor, and what kind of mentally um, practices do you put in place to really, I guess, not let that cut too deep?
So I'm head on, all in, and I'm all about it. I'm going to make mistakes. If I'm not making mistakes, I'm not doing my job. If somebody wants to criticize, I'm open to it. I want to hear it, because the only way for me to change and fix the things I've done wrong is to understand what they are. Having said that, people in Newfoundland, unfortunately, don't always vote for the individual. and you got a segment of the population that votes for a color, and sadly, it's a big part of our politics, and it's a big part of the issue with our politics. And you get another big segment of the population that votes for a leader, and again, huge issue. And then you get a segment that votes for the individual. So I'll say this: if you vote for the color, you're guaranteed to be disappointed. There's no question. I mean, we still have people voting for Frank Moores and Joey, more so Joey, but we do. And they're bound to be disappointed regardless of the outcome. If you vote for the leader, you're not going to have representation. I always urge people to vote for the individual in their district that's going to represent them the best. And if that's NDP, Independent, Liberal, or PC, that's who you should vote for. And the failure in our politics, not just in Newfoundland, but across the country, is that people vote based on a party system versus the individual that's going to represent them. Well, I'll tell you, if all 40 MHAs in this province represented their people the way I represent my people, and this province elected the best person for the job, we wouldn't have a situation with our political system. Our political system will work just fine. And unfortunately, there are still people getting buried with Joey's picture in their casket. And I don't say that because Joey's a liberal. I say that just to highlight the fact that people are voting for a color. And again, people look at Chess and Andrew Fury and they compare them to each other and they're going to vote based on that. Listen, there's no one person going to get us out of the hole we're in. We're in a mess. And if anyone thinks that either Chess or Andrew can get us out of this mess, they're very wrong. We need a team. We need a team of competent people who are going to listen to each other and listen to the people in this province to find a way out of the situation we're in. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose.
And now, one of the other things that I wanted to touch on, and you've mentioned your family a few times. I'll say, unfortunately, when you get out and you speak and you represent yourself to the public, sometimes people and they'll tie your family into that, with your wife and your kids. And so sometimes, and I know you've mentioned that you've had conversations with your kids and your wife before you've made these political decisions, but there is a big family sacrifice at that standpoint too, where sometimes, what you go out and do in the public can sometimes, be a confrontation for them. How are you navigating situations like that?
Again, I'll say head on. So, me and my wife have been married 20 years, very loving and committed relationship, and we do things together. We have bad days, we have good days, we have bad days as individuals, and we have bad days as a couple. But at the end of the day, we talk it through and we move forward. Newfoundlanders are pretty nice, right? And that's we're known for that. So I will say, my kids have had a bit of a hard time from time to time. I don't think my wife Nicole has faced any adversity out in public, and we're good for it, right? We are truly in this together. As much as I believe in myself, as much as I believe in what I'm doing, I will tell you that my wife believes in me more than anyone on this planet, and she sees things in me that nobody else sees. And whether that's blind or love, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'd be nothing without her. And yeah, she's a tough cookie, and she knows what this is all about. And like I said, that don't mean there's not bad days, but she supports me and she believes that I can make a difference. And Nicole believes that I'm the right person at the right time.
My generation, I think, definitely struggles with the fact of trying to find true love and significant other and commitment. So what's some advice to a successful, happy marriage?
You'll know when it happens.
Yeah.
True story. Listen, me and my wife met August the 5th, I believe, of 1999. She walked into a room full of people, and I looked at the guy standing next to me, and I thought, that's the woman I'm going to marry. And 3 months later, we were engaged, and 9 months after that, we were married, and we've been together ever since. So, honesty, humility, understanding, sacrifice. Very early in the game, I learned that compromise was huge. we were living in New Brunswick, and my uncle lived across the street, and I wanted a new quad, and my wife wanted a new fur coat. And we ended up buying her a fur coat and hanging it up out in the garage. So compromise is a big part of it for sure.
Now, with the election having to move in delegate, I guess, in different ways, just with the current climate and things of that nature, I guess, what have you been doing in terms of just, I guess, campaigning now and preparing for the, I guess, final results?
Yeah, so we, I guess, when we went to secure our headquarters, we went and looked for the most COVID-friendly office we could find. We were fortunate to get an office here in Claremont that had separate offices, a huge waiting area, a huge common area, glass barriers, the whole shot. So we were extremely COVID ready and friendly from day one. So we have had people coming to our office on a regular basis. They could come in, buzz in, sign in, do whatever had to be done and leave. Telephones have been a huge part of it now. I know that the electorate is getting sick of getting phone calls, and rightfully so. We had a huge door knocking campaign through every community, and sadly, the only place I didn't get to was St. Brendan's, and I'm disappointed in that. We were scheduled to go to St. Brendan's on last Wednesday, I guess, so Wednesday the 11th of February, and that Tuesday, so Monday was a storm. Sunday was the announcement of some of the COVID cases. Monday was a storm. We got together as a team, discussed it, and decided that we were going to shut down door knocking. I did a video and put it on Facebook Tuesday, announcing that we wouldn't do it. We were one of the first teams in Newfoundland actually to announce that we were going to cease, just out of sheer caution. So, between telephones, Facebook, friends, and it's been tough though. I mean, really, listen, as a politician, your expectation is to shake hands and be seen and be known and talk to people face to face, make eye contact. All of those things are gone. So it's been a very tough campaign, very tough.
I'm curious now too, because with the COVID briefings that we've received every day, a big talking point at the end of it is a lot of politician questions come up and are directed to Minister Fury, more or less because he's the one sat there available for these questions. And there's the outrage with a lot of Newfoundlanders in terms of continuing the election and things of that. I'm curious with your comments in terms of that regards.
Can I just take a very quick break before I answer that?
Yeah, 100%. All right, welcome back. Quick little intermission break there, but yeah, go ahead with your response there.
Yeah, so I guess so we're in a pandemic, and I don't want to politicize the fact of not what we're going through, but what we've gone through. I mean, it's been 11 months. My honest belief is that this election shouldn't be right now. The legislation is there that it had to be 12 months. Oddly enough, yesterday is the day that Lloyd Parrott resigned. So when Andrew Fury was appointed as premier back in August 4th, I believe, he had 12 months from that day to call the election. And shortly after the House opened in October, there was legislation that got put to the House Assembly in which there was a motion put to the floor where any election would be put off to a fixed date later on. Part of that legislation was about vaccinations and safety, and so everybody in the House, with the exception of the Liberal government, voted in favor, and it passed, but it was a private members' resolution, and they just chose to ignore it. Andrew Fury on the 29th of December did a very telling interview, in my opinion, with Peter Cowan from CBC, in which he talked about the British parliamentary system and his right as the premier, and very point blank said that an election was his prerogative and his alone, and it would be up to him, and he would take full responsibility. There was also lots of conversations where he said that they'd gone through every scenario with Bruce Schock, and obviously they didn't, given the mess we're in right now, because I would think that the very first scenario would go through would be the one we're in right now. and we wouldn't be having companies from Quebec answering our phone calls, registering voters, and I think is a huge problem. What I haven't heard that's very telling is I haven't heard him say that he had a conversation with Dr. Janice Fitzgerald. I haven't heard him say that Chief Medical Officer Health was on board. She's very overtly, I won't say she's avoided the question because I think she's fantastic. And I think she's put in a very stressful and difficult situation. She's done best with what, the support that she's been given. She's, in my opinion, done a phenomenal job. But I believe, with the Moya Green report coming out, and listen, this winter is flu season, and flu season, everybody knows that flu season is COVID season, and that the height of their pandemic would come in January, February, March. And we just came through Christmas where people have been spending time together. And so listen, I don't blame this current outbreak on this election. It's not because of this election. But we knew it could happen, and it did. And we shouldn't be in an election cycle. There's no question. If you look to British Columbia, so I believe there was so a few statistics. There's only been 3 elections ever called in the middle of winter. This is one. So that is, always been historical because of weather. The other thing that's oddly funny is that Brian Tobin was the last one that was called. Brian Tobin was Fury's chief advisor, or he pulls the puppet strings, or however you want to put it. So there's that. Then you've got to look to the statistics. They reference the statistics from the other elections. The death rate in British Columbia jumped significantly after the election, as it did in the States and other places. And so, all of that should have been concerning. We know for a fact that there would have been more vaccinations handed out, and we would have been in, come June, July, August, September, October, whenever, we would have been out of the peak of a COVID season. Now, that's not to say there couldn't have been another outbreak, because it's very possible, but the likelihood is far less. To quote the doctors, the epidemiology of it is the science is there to show that when the spring and the summer comes, flu season goes away, and COVID is like a flu. So between the Moya Green report and the urgency to have a majority government prior to the passing of an election, we're already in a situation that most Newfoundlanders and Labradorians don't understand. I would assume that the Lieutenant Governor, who I believe you worked for, will have to issue a warrant in order to put an interim spending bill forward so we can pay our public servants, all of which they were trying to avoid, which they didn't, and not pass a budget and have the Moya Green report in place without the public seeing it. So for me to say as a politician that this is all about politics is a bit asinine, but I believe that Andrew Fury put politics before people, and I believe that it was a huge mistake and it was a gamble. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that the PC party wouldn't have done the same thing, but I will tell you I wouldn't have done the same thing. And I'll tell you that if I was in a caucus room and we were a minority government, I would have said no. I would have said I don't agree with this, and I would have been vocal about it publicly. And the one thing that really sticks out to me through all of this is that you've heard every single candidate that is running, with the exception of the Liberals, speak out and say that this is terrible. And not one Liberal candidate has said that this is a bad thing. And not one Liberal candidate has said, I'm here for you and I want to fight for their constituents. They've all talked about Team Fury and standing up for Andrew Fury. And I don't think right now is the time for that. I think right now is the time to stand up for the people that you're running to represent. So I believe it's a mistake. I believe it's, it was a calculated risk. And, I don't think we should be gambling with people's lives, period. That's it. We just should not be gambling with people's lives. It could have been done later on. There was legislation that was agreed to. They just decided not to. So, and to quote him, it was his prerogative and his prerogative alone. So here we are. And it's not Bruce Chalk's fault. It's not Janice Fitzgerald's fault. Andrew Fury decided he wanted an election right now.
Now, moving forward, what's the plan with your team over the next little while here?
So 8 o'clock tomorrow night, obviously special ballots end. So we'll work really hard tomorrow, up until 8 o'clock tomorrow night, trying to help as many people get special ballots as possible. And it's a huge situation, right? So, I mean, you look to my district specifically, and we've got areas in Snooks Harbor, Lower Lansco, Petley, St. Brendan's, Calls Harbor, just to name a few, that not only don't have internet access, but they don't have cell phone access. So their ability to access the special ballot has been deterred for sure. Not necessarily impossible, but if you look at an announcement on Friday night, if people don't have internet and don't have cell phone, and you're a senior, some of these people didn't get news of the election being postponed until they either went to the poll on Saturday and seen it was canceled, or they watched Monday nights 6 o'clock in TV or CBC NewsHour, which I think is despicable, but just my own opinion. So we'll get through tomorrow. Obviously, after tomorrow, it becomes a huge game of data for us. We need to analyze the data, understand the voters, understand the people who applied for special ballots, recognize and highlight the people that have said they're going to support us and have ordered special ballots. We're going to start making phone calls again, and people don't want to get the phone calls. People are sick of them, trying to urge people to fill their special ballot out. And a lot of people don't understand a special ballot doesn't come with a name on it, so it'll come with a blank space. So some people don't even know what they have to do or write in. This has gone from being an election where people have a democratic right to go to a polling station and cast a ballot to a game of survivor, which is not at all what our political system is about. I mean, if you look at, I guess, I'll say there's plenty of areas in my district, but even if you take, for example, so you look to the coastal Labrador or the Northern Peninsula, and you look at the literacy rates, and you look at the population from the, if you look at the demographics and the seniors and the literacy issues and different things, it's very calculated to me, and I don't agree with it on any level. I think this election stinks. Now, I'll also say, I believe that my counterparts are disadvantaged equally as I am. So I believe if you're running, everybody is equally disadvantaged. I don't think that I have any advantage, or I don't believe that my opponent has any advantage. And there's some out there that get on with that shit, but that's what it is shit. The sad part is that the electorate is disadvantaged. So if you're a person who has literacy issues, or you have a lack of internet, or you're isolated, you're out on an island, any of those things, if you're scared, if you're too scared to go to the mailbox, if you're a rotational worker, there's plenty of rotational workers that would not have had the opportunity to vote had this not gotten prolonged. And I believe that was another part of the calculation, but now they will give an opportunity to vote. But all of those things play into it. So for me, I got an equal footing with the people I'm running against. But I do believe that there are people in my district that are have a democratic right, and I'll say there's good men and women who died so they could have the right to choose. And I'm not a person who says that soldiers fought and died so you could vote. I don't believe that. I believe they fought and died so you could have a choice, and people should have the opportunity to exercise that choice, whether that's a choice to vote or not to vote. But I don't think everyone has been given the equal opportunity to make that choice.
Now, in terms of voter registration and information, just for the sake of listeners, could you provide context on how people can vote, how people can register, when the last day of voting is, and yeah.
So you can certainly contact us at our office, 466-1353. You can go online at elections.gov.nl.ca. I don't have the phone numbers off the top of my head. I can get them here actually pretty quick. What I would say is if you've got issues or questions, just call our office at 466-1353, and we will assist. We will help you through your application process. And if you want to try it on your own, you can just call the phone numbers 729-0789 or 729-0712. And there are men and women on the other end that will help you. You only have till 8 o'clock tomorrow night, and after 8 o'clock tomorrow night, you don't have an opportunity to vote. So it's a mail-in process. After you do your application, you'll receive a mail-in ballot, and you get to write the name in of the individual that you want to represent you, and hopefully that's me.
Well, hey Lloyd, I wish you the best of luck in the tail end of this campaign, and I just want to say thanks for joining us here and being so gracious with your time. Anything else that you wanted to add or plug in, feel free to mention here now.
Yeah, I'll just say I talked to one of my counterparts last night, and he said his exact words were, "Holy shit!" He said, "You're going on a podcast." He said, "That's going to be so much fun, and you're going to be able to laugh and relax and enjoy yourself." And well, I enjoyed myself. I'd like to do this again, but on a lighthearted standpoint, because I got a very good sense of humor, and I think there's lots of things we can discuss where you probably appreciate, oppose, or get a chuckle out of my opinions.
No, 100%. I think just in light of the current climate, I mean, I think it wouldn't be doing justice to anybody listening if we didn't discuss the election, obviously, which is why I enjoyed the first part where we got to know a little bit more about you and the route before politics.
I appreciate it, Robert. It's been a very it's a good conversation. I don't talk about a lot of this stuff sometimes, and it's nice to be challenged and ask questions and remember where you came from, because you'll never get where you're going if you don't remember where you came from.
Well, hey, thanks again, and like I said, I really appreciate your time. Take care.
All right, man. Take care.
Okay, that's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of the Yes By Podcast, Newfoundland's #1 podcast. I've been your host, Robert Greeley, and guys, don't forget, go out and vote, and also this is the last day for the whole special ballot thing that we were just talking about. So if you got to go do that, make sure you go do that. In the meantime, stay best kind.